Close your eyes and let your mind drift back to the year 1715. Picture yourself standing on the weathered docks of Port Royal, Jamaica. The air is thick with salt, sweat, and something far more dangerous than any Hollywood movie could capture. You're not looking at the swashbuckling heroes of cinema with their perfectly clean shirts and choreographed sword fights. No, you're witnessing something far more extraordinary. Real pirates, real innovation, real survival against impossible odds. Tonight, we journey beyond the legends into the authentic world of piracy's golden age. We'll explore how these seafaring rebels revolutionized naval warfare, discover the remarkable women who commanded their own ships, uncover the rise and fall of entire pirate kingdoms, and reveal how disease and death shaped every aspect of their dangerous lives. This is the real story of pirates, not the Hollywood version, but the ingenious, brutal, and surprisingly sophisticated reality of life on the high seas. The morning sun cast long shadows across the Caribbean as Captain Samuel Bellamy studied his latest prize. The merchant vessel Whydah floated beside his own ship, her holds heavy with silver and gold. But Bellamy wasn't just thinking about treasure. He was thinking about transformation. Hollywood shows us pirates magically appearing on perfect ships, but the reality was far more ingenious. Pirates rarely built ships from scratch. Instead, they were master engineers of conversion, taking captured vessels and transforming them into instruments of maritime warfare that naval architects had never imagined. The Whydah, originally a slave ship, would become Bellamy's flagship after months of careful modification. But what exactly did pirates change? Let's step aboard and discover the innovations that made these ships the terror of the seas. First, speed was everything. Pirates needed to catch their prey and escape pursuing naval vessels. So they would strip away unnecessary weight, ornate cabins, heavy furniture, anything that didn't contribute to speed or firepower. The Whydah's elegant passenger quarters were gutted, replaced with storage for weapons and supplies. But the most crucial modification was the hull itself. Pirates would careen their ships, deliberately beach them to scrape away barnacles and marine growth that slowed them down. They'd also add copper plating to the hull, an expensive innovation that most merchant ships couldn't afford. This smooth surface could add several knots to a ship's speed, the difference between escape and capture. Step into the world of pirate armament, where necessity bred innovation. Unlike naval vessels with standardized gun placement, pirate ships were floating arsenals customized for maximum intimidation and effectiveness. Pirates discovered that mounting cannons on swivel bases allowed for much greater flexibility in battle. While Navy ships could only fire broadside, a well-modified pirate vessel could bring guns to bear from multiple angles. The legendary pirate Bartholomew Roberts equipped his ship, Royal Fortune, with 40 guns, but more importantly, he positioned them to create overlapping fields of fire that could devastate any vessel that dared approach. But perhaps the most ingenious innovation was the development of what pirates called murder holes. Small openings cut into the hull near the waterline, fitted with small cannons or swivel guns. During close combat, these hidden weapons could rake an enemy deck when they least expected it. Pirates also pioneered the use of chain shot and bar shot, specialized ammunition designed to destroy rigging and sails rather than hulls. A single well-placed chain shot could disable a merchant vessel without sinking the valuable cargo. This wasn't just about destruction, it was surgical warfare designed for maximum profit. The most feared pirate ships carried what sailors called widowmakers, cannons loaded with scrap metal, nails, and broken glass. These anti-personnel rounds could clear an enemy deck in seconds, but their true power lay in reputation. Word of such weapons spread through every port, often causing ships to surrender without a fight. While movies show pirates stumbling around the ocean by luck, the reality was that successful pirates were master navigators who developed techniques that wouldn't look out of place in modern maritime handbooks. Consider the case of Captain Edward Thatch, better known as Blackbeard. His dominance of the Carolina coast wasn't due to blind aggression, but to an intimate knowledge of shallow waters that larger naval vessels couldn't navigate. Blackbeard modified his ship Queen Anne's Revenge with a shallow draft design that allowed him to disappear into coastal inlets where pursuit was impossible. Pirates developed what we might recognize today as early intelligence networks. They maintained contacts in every major port, gathering information about ship movements, cargo manifests, and naval patrol schedules. This wasn't random piracy. It was calculated maritime warfare based on superior intelligence gathering. The most successful pirate captains kept detailed logs not just of wind and weather, but of ocean currents, seasonal patterns, and the behavioral habits of different types of vessels. Captain Calico Jack Rackham's journal, recovered after his capture, contained detailed notes on how different ships responded to various approach tactics, essentially creating the first manual of maritime psychological warfare. Pirates also pioneered techniques for reading the ocean that went far beyond simple navigation. They could identify the type of ship approaching from miles away simply by observing how it moved through the water. A heavily loaded merchant vessel sat differently in the waves than a naval frigate. An experienced pirate lookout could estimate a ship's speed, cargo load, and even crew size just from watching its movement patterns. The choreographed sword fights of Hollywood bear no resemblance to the brutal efficiency of actual pirate combat. Real ship-to-ship warfare was about positioning, timing, and psychological dominance long before the first shot was fired. Successful pirates understood that the ideal battle was one that never happened. The sight of a black flag was often enough to trigger immediate surrender, but this reputation had to be carefully maintained through strategic displays of overwhelming force. When combat was unavoidable, pirates employed tactics that naval commanders considered unsporting, but highly effective. The preferred approach was the rake, positioning their ship to fire the length of an enemy vessel's deck, causing maximum casualties with minimum risk. Unlike naval battles where ships engaged broadside to broadside, pirates maneuvered for advantage like predators stalking prey. The boarding action, the climactic moment in every pirate movie, was actually the last resort of competent pirates. A successful boarding required getting close enough for enemy fire to cause significant casualties. Far better to disable a ship's rigging with chain shot, then negotiate surrender from a safe distance. When boarding was necessary, pirates had developed techniques that maximized psychological impact. They would fire all guns simultaneously just before grappling, filling the air with smoke and deafening noise. In this confusion, pirates would swing aboard screaming and brandishing multiple weapons, creating an impression of supernatural ferocity. But the most effective pirate tactic was the false flag approach. Pirates carried flags from multiple nations and would approach under friendly colors until the last possible moment. By the time the target realized the deception, it was too late to escape or prepare proper defenses. Behind every successful pirate ship was a complex economic operation that would impress modern business analysts. Pirates had to balance the cost of modifications against potential profits, and their solutions were often brilliantly innovative. Consider the financial challenge. A captured merchant vessel might be worth $10,000 in cargo, but converting it into an effective pirate ship could cost $2,000 in modifications. Pirates developed methods to minimize these costs while maximizing effectiveness. They established hidden shipyards in remote locations where skilled craftsmen, often former naval carpenters who had joined pirate crews, could work without interference. These facilities were marvels of efficiency, capable of transforming a merchant vessel into a fighting ship in just weeks. Pirates also pioneered the concept of modular design. Rather than permanent modifications, they created removable gun platforms, false bulkheads, and temporary reinforcements that could be quickly installed or removed depending on circumstances. A ship could appear to be a harmless merchant vessel during the day, then transform into a warship under cover of darkness. The most successful pirate operations maintained multiple vessels with different specializations: fast sloops for reconnaissance and pursuit, heavily armed ships for combat, and converted cargo vessels for transporting captured goods. This diversified fleet approach allowed pirates to adapt to any situation and minimized the risk of losing everything in a single engagement. Pirates operated on the cutting edge of maritime technology, often decades ahead of official naval development. Their survival depended on innovation, and they had the freedom to experiment that hidebound naval bureaucracies lacked. One of their most significant contributions was in the field of ship communications. Pirates developed an elaborate system of flag signals that allowed coordination between multiple vessels across vast distances. These weren't simple signals, but complex codes that could convey detailed tactical information. Pirates also pioneered night fighting techniques. They created special lanterns with colored glass that could signal specific maneuvers in darkness. More importantly, they developed methods for silent approach, wrapping oars in cloth, using dark sails, and even employing small boats to tow larger vessels into position. The legendary pirate Captain Thomas II revolutionized the use of weather in naval warfare. His detailed observations of wind patterns around Madagascar allowed him to predict weather changes days in advance, giving him a crucial advantage in positioning his ships for optimal attack or escape routes. Perhaps most impressively, pirates developed early forms of what we would recognize as psychological warfare through ship design. Blackbeard's ship flew multiple black flags and had slow-burning hemp rope woven into his rigging, creating an otherworldly appearance wreathed in smoke. These theatrical elements were carefully calculated to inspire terror and encourage surrender. Pirates also understood the importance of ship hygiene in an era when disease could destroy a crew faster than any enemy. They developed ventilation systems, waste management protocols, and water purification methods that were far superior to those used on merchant vessels or even many naval ships. As we leave this world of maritime innovation and enter our next chapter, imagine yourself on the deck of a perfectly modified pirate vessel, wind filling the sails, knowing that every beam and rope has been optimized for speed, stealth, and survival. But now, let's discover something Hollywood almost never shows us: the remarkable women who commanded these ships. The year was 1720, and on the deck of Captain Calico Jack Rackham's ship, two of the most formidable pirates in the Caribbean were preparing for battle. Their names were Bonny and Mary Read, and they were about to shatter every assumption about gender and power in the golden age of piracy. But their story begins long before they met, in a world where women faced impossible choices and found extraordinary solutions. Mary Read's journey to piracy began in childhood, dressed as a boy to claim an inheritance meant for her deceased brother. This early experience of living as a man taught her that identity was fluid, that survival often required becoming someone else entirely. When she joined the British military, still disguised as a man, she discovered she had a talent for warfare that society would never have allowed her to develop as a woman. The transition from soldier to pirate happened gradually. Mary's ship was captured by pirates, and rather than reveal her true identity, she found herself recruited into a world where competence mattered more than convention. Pirates, outcasts from traditional society themselves, were surprisingly accepting of anyone who could hold their own in a fight. Bonny's path was different, but equally remarkable. Born to wealth in the Carolinas, she could have lived a comfortable life as a plantation owner's daughter. Instead, she chose rebellion, marrying a small-time pirate against her father's wishes and eventually making her way to Nassau, the infamous pirate haven. In Nassau, Anne discovered a world where traditional rules didn't apply. Here, among the outcasts and rebels of the Caribbean, she found she could be more than society had ever allowed. Her marriage to James Bonny had been a stepping stone to freedom, but when she met Calico Jack Rackham, she found a partner who saw her potential as a pirate leader. The practicalities of maintaining a male disguise aboard a pirate ship were far more complex than Hollywood suggests. It wasn't simply a matter of cutting hair and binding breasts. It required a complete transformation of movement, voice, and behavior patterns developed over years of practice. Mary Red had perfected her masculine persona over decades. She had learned to walk with a man's gait, to speak in lower tones, to use the casual profanity that marked acceptance among sailors. More importantly, she had developed the physical skills that made her deception believable. She could handle rigging as well as any sailor, fight with sword and pistol, and navigate by the stars. The close quarters of ship life made discovery a constant risk. Pirates lived in each other's pockets, sharing hammocks, eating from common pots, with little privacy for personal needs. Successful female pirates had to plan every moment of their day around maintaining their disguise. They developed ingenious solutions. Extra layers of clothing could disguise body shape while providing protection in battle. They would volunteer for night watches, using darkness to handle personal needs privately. Most importantly, they cultivated reputations for fierceness that discouraged too much close examination of their behavior. The psychological pressure was enormous. One slip of the tongue, one moment of inattention, could mean exposure and possible death. Yet both Mary Read and Anne Bonny maintained their disguises for years, becoming respected members of their crews long before their true identities were discovered. When Anne Bonny's gender was eventually revealed to Calico Jack's crew, something remarkable happened. Rather than rejection, she found acceptance and eventually respect as a leader in her own right. This transformation reveals something profound about pirate society that sets it apart from the rigid hierarchies of the age. Pirates operated under what historians call rough democracy. Captains were elected by crew vote and could be deposed if they proved incompetent. This system, while still male-dominated, was more meritocratic than any other maritime organization of the era. If a woman could prove her worth in combat and seamanship, she had a path to advancement that existed nowhere else in society. Anne Bonny quickly established herself as one of the most effective fighters aboard Rackham's ship. Contemporary accounts describe her as fearless in battle, quick with both sword and pistol, and possessed of a tactical mind that earned the respect of seasoned pirates. When the crew voted on important decisions, her voice carried weight equal to any man's. Mary Read's revelation came during a heated battle when her disguise was literally torn away by enemy action. Instead of panic, her crewmates rallied around her, their respect for her fighting skills overriding any concerns about her gender. She had proven herself in the most fundamental way pirates understood, through courage under fire. But female pirate leadership extended beyond individual achievement. Both women brought different perspectives to pirate operations that proved highly valuable. They were often better at reading social situations, understanding when negotiation might succeed where violence would fail. Their presence also helped pirates blend into coastal communities where suspicious groups of men might attract unwanted attention. The most dramatic challenge facing female pirates was pregnancy. In an age before reliable contraception, sexual relationships inevitably led to pregnancy, and pregnancy aboard a pirate ship created unprecedented complications. Anne Bonny's pregnancy, while actively pirating, forced her crew to confront realities no pirate code had ever addressed. How do you maintain the secrecy essential to pirate operations when one of your crew members is visibly pregnant? How do you handle the medical needs of childbirth aboard a ship designed for warfare? Pirates developed surprisingly sophisticated solutions. When Anne's pregnancy became known, the crew modified their operations to keep her away from major battles while still utilizing her skills in planning and navigation. They established connections with friendly midwives in various ports, creating a support network that could handle medical emergencies. The reality of pirate relationships was far more complex than the romantic adventures of fiction. Mary Reed's relationship with another pirate created a love triangle that nearly destroyed crew cohesion, but it also demonstrated the emotional bonds that held pirate crews together in the face of constant danger. These relationships weren't just personal matters. They affected ship operations, crew loyalty, and strategic decisions. Pirates had to navigate jealousy, favoritism, and emotional conflicts while maintaining the discipline necessary for survival. The presence of women in these relationships added layers of complexity that tested every aspect of pirate social organization. The fighting abilities of female pirates were legendary among their contemporaries, and surviving accounts suggest these reputations were well-deserved. Mary Reed was described as one of the finest swordsmen in the Caribbean, capable of holding her own against multiple opponents, but their combat effectiveness went beyond individual skill. Female pirates often developed fighting styles that took advantage of opponents' assumptions. Enemies expecting to face a weaker opponent were often caught off guard by the ferocity and skill of women who had trained specifically to overcome physical disadvantages. Bonny pioneered techniques that combined traditional swordsmanship with unconventional tactics. She would use her opponent's chivalrous hesitation against them, striking in moments when social conditioning made men reluctant to attack a woman with full force. By the time they realized their mistake, the fight was often over. The psychological warfare aspect was equally important. The sight of women fighting alongside men was so shocking to 18th-century sensibilities that it often paralyzed enemy crews. Witnesses described how the appearance of armed women on a pirate ship created panic that went far beyond their actual numbers. Female pirates also served as interrogators and negotiators in situations where male pirates might be too intimidating. Prisoners were more likely to provide information to captors who didn't fit their expectations of pirate brutality, allowing female crew members to gather intelligence that purely male crews might miss. The capture of Calico Jack's crew in October 1720 brought the careers of Bonny and Mary Reed to a dramatic end, but their trial became a sensation that revealed just how extraordinary their accomplishments had been. Governor Nicholas Laws of Jamaica presided over a trial that captivated the colonial world. Here were two women who had not only participated in piracy, but had excelled at it, challenging every assumption about gender roles and capabilities that 18th-century society held sacred. The testimony revealed the full scope of their achievements. Witnesses described how both women had fought more fiercely than many of their male companions during the final battle, continuing to resist even after most of the crew had been overwhelmed. One witness claimed that Bonny had single-handedly held off multiple attackers while trying to rally her demoralized crewmates. Mary Reed's defense was particularly compelling. She argued that she had been forced into piracy by circumstances, but her actions had been those of a soldier rather than a criminal. Her military background and evident tactical knowledge impressed even the prosecutors, who seemed uncertain how to handle a defendant who challenged every legal precedent for trying women. Bonny's pregnancy saved her from immediate execution, but it also became a symbol of the complex realities female pirates faced. Here was a woman who had commanded respect through violence and leadership, now claiming the protection of motherhood, a contradiction that 18th century legal systems were unprepared to handle. The trial transcripts preserve their voices across 3 centuries. When asked if she had anything to say before sentencing, Mary Read replied that she pleaded her belly, pregnancy, then added, "If it had not been for that, I would not have been taken." Even facing death, she maintained the defiant spirit that had made her a successful pirate. As we leave these remarkable women, imagine yourself in that Nassau courtroom, watching as society grappled with the existence of people who had transcended every boundary it tried to impose. But now, our journey takes us to explore the communities these pirates created, the rise and fall of entire pirate kingdoms. Picture Nassau in 1715, a town that had become something unprecedented in human history, a functioning democracy run entirely by criminals. Here, on the island of New Providence in the Bahamas, over 1,000 pirates had created a society that operated by rules they had written themselves. The transformation began after a Spanish raid in 1703 had left Nassau virtually abandoned. When pirates began using the natural harbor as a base, they found a perfect location, deep enough for large ships, hidden enough to avoid naval patrols, and positioned to strike at the shipping lanes that carried Spanish treasure back to Europe. But Nassau became more than just a pirate base. Under the unofficial leadership of captains like Benjamin Hornigold and Henry Jennings, it evolved into a genuine alternative society with its own laws, economy, and culture. The Pirate Council met weekly in what had been the governor's mansion, now claimed by the pirate community. Here, democratically elected representatives from each ship debated everything from harbor regulations to the distribution of captured goods. Decisions were made by vote, with each captain's voice carrying weight proportional to the size of their crew. This wasn't anarchy. It was a carefully structured society that had to solve complex problems. How do you prevent conflicts between crews competing for the same prizes? How do you maintain security when your population consists entirely of armed criminals? How do you create trust between people whose lives depend on betraying others? The pirates developed solutions that were remarkably sophisticated. They established a maritime court system where disputes between crews were settled by elected judges rather than violence. They created a common defense fund where each crew contributed a percentage of their profits to maintain fortifications and pay for intelligence networks. Nassau's economy was a fascinating hybrid of legal commerce and organized crime that would intrigue modern economists. Pirates needed to convert stolen goods into usable currency, purchase supplies for their ships, and invest their profits in ways that would provide long-term security. The island became a massive fencing operation where stolen goods from across the Caribbean were converted into legitimate merchandise. Spanish silver was melted down and recast to obscure its origins. Captured textiles were altered and resold to merchants who either didn't know or didn't care about their provenance. But pirates also created entirely legitimate businesses. Many established shipyards where captured vessels were converted for pirate use, employing skilled craftsmen who were paid regular wages. Others opened taverns, brothels, and supply stores that served both the pirate community and legitimate merchants who found Nassau's free trade policies attractive. The most successful pirate captains became venture capitalists, investing their profits in multiple ships and crews. Captain Benjamin Hornigold financed several smaller operations, taking a percentage of their profits in exchange for providing ships and initial supplies. This created a complex web of financial relationships that tied the pirate community together. Pirates also pioneered early forms of insurance and retirement planning. Successful crews would pool resources to purchase property in places like Madagascar or the Carolinas, creating refuges where retired pirates could live safely. They established funds to support the widows and orphans of crew members killed in action, recognition that their dangerous lifestyle required social safety nets that didn't exist in conventional society. The pirate codes that governed Nassau were far more sophisticated than the simple articles portrayed in popular culture. These were detailed legal documents that addressed everything from the division of booty to the procedures for electing new officers. Consider the code established by Bartholomew Roberts' crew, one of the most detailed to survive. It specified that every crew member had an equal vote in important matters, that officers were elected democratically, and that punishments were determined by jury trial rather than captain's whim. This level of democratic participation was unheard of in the hierarchical societies of the 18th century. The pirate justice system had to handle crimes within a community of criminals, a philosophical challenge that required creative solutions. Murder of a fellow pirate was punishable by death, but murder of a merchant or naval officer during a raid was considered part of business. Theft from the common fund was considered treason, but stealing from enemy ships was the entire point of their profession. Pirates developed early forms of conflict resolution that emphasized restoration over punishment. A pirate caught cheating at cards might be required to forfeit his share of the next prize rather than face physical punishment. Someone who failed to maintain their weapons properly might be assigned extra duties rather than being flogged. The most serious crime in pirate society was cowardice in battle. This wasn't just about individual failing. Cowardice could get the entire crew killed. Pirates who fled from combat faced a process that resembled a military court-martial, with testimony from witnesses and deliberation by their peers before sentence was passed. But perhaps most remarkably, pirate society provided mechanisms for redemption. A pirate who had been punished for misconduct could earn their way back to full standing through demonstrated competence and loyalty. This recognition that people could change was progressive even by modern standards. Nassau's pirate republic had to navigate complex relationships with legitimate governments, creating a form of underground diplomacy that mixed pragmatism with necessity. Pirates needed safe harbors, supplies, and markets for stolen goods, which required maintaining relationships with colonial officials who were officially committed to suppressing piracy. Governor Charles Eden of North Carolina provides a perfect example of this gray area diplomacy. Officially, Eden was bound by royal orders to arrest pirates on sight. Unofficially, he provided safe harbor to pirates like Blackbeard in exchange for a share of their profits and intelligence about Spanish shipping. These relationships were formalized through documents that would seem familiar to modern international lawyers. Pirates would receive letters of marque, essentially licenses to attack enemy shipping, from colonial governors who claimed authority they didn't actually possess. These documents provided legal cover for actions that everyone involved knew were essentially piracy. Pirates also developed their own diplomatic protocols for dealing with native populations in the Caribbean and along the American coast. They often found themselves natural allies with indigenous groups who had their own conflicts with European colonial powers. The Mosquito Coast of Central America became a zone where pirates and native groups cooperated in complex alliances that frustrated Spanish colonial authorities for decades. Pirates provided weapons and European goods in exchange for intelligence about Spanish ship movements and safe harbor during hurricane season. These relationships required pirates to develop genuine diplomatic skills. They had to understand cultural differences, negotiate agreements that satisfied both sides, and maintain trust across significant language and cultural barriers. Many successful pirate captains were as skilled at diplomacy as they were at warfare, while women like Bonny and Mary Read gained fame for fighting aboard pirate ships. The broader female community in Nassau played equally crucial roles in sustaining pirate society. These women created the social infrastructure that allowed a community of transient criminals to function as a stable society. Many were former indentured servants or escaped slaves who found in Nassau a freedom unavailable anywhere else in the colonial world. Here, traditional social hierarchies based on birth and race were replaced by a more fluid system based on contribution and competence. Women in Nassau operated businesses that were essential to pirate operations. They ran the taverns where crews gathered to plan raids and divide profits. They managed the boarding houses where pirates stayed between voyages. Most importantly, they served as intelligence agents, gathering information from newly arrived ships and passing it on to pirate captains planning their next moves. The medical services provided by women were crucial to pirate survival. Formal medical training was rare, but many women had developed skills in treating wounds, setting bones, and managing diseases through necessity and experience. Pirate crews would often delay sailing until they could recruit a woman with medical knowledge to accompany them. Nassau's female community also provided continuity that the male pirate population lacked. While pirate crews came and went with the seasons and the fortunes of war, the women often remained for years, creating institutional memory and social networks that held the community together. They served as bankers and money changers, helping pirates convert stolen goods into usable currency and managing savings for crews planning to retire from active piracy. Many had contacts throughout the Caribbean that proved invaluable for pirates needing to move quickly between different bases. The end of Nassau's pirate republic began not with military defeat, but with economic pressure and changing political realities. By 1718, the War of Spanish Succession had ended, meaning that European powers could focus resources on suppressing piracy rather than fighting each other. King George I appointed Woodes Rogers as governor of the Bahamas with explicit orders to end pirate control of Nassau. Rogers was a former privateer himself who understood pirate tactics and psychology better than previous officials. His approach combined overwhelming force with attractive alternatives. Rogers arrived with a fleet of warships and a royal pardon for any pirate willing to give up their career. This wasn't just clemency, it was a comprehensive package that included land grants, employment opportunities, and integration into legitimate colonial society. The response split the pirate community. Older pirates, weary of constant danger and attracted by the possibility of retirement with their accumulated wealth intact, accepted the pardon in large numbers. Captain Benjamin Hornigold, one of Nassau's founding leaders, not only accepted the pardon, but became a pirate hunter working for Rogers. But younger, more ideologically committed pirates saw Rogers' arrival as a declaration of war. Captains like Charles Vane and Calico Jack Rackham refused the pardon and prepared to fight for their independence. The resulting split tore Nassau's pirate community apart, with former allies becoming bitter enemies. The siege of Nassau lasted months, with Rogers using both military pressure and psychological warfare to break pirate resistance. He publicized the comfortable lives of pardoned pirates, while demonstrating the increasing risks facing those who remained outlaws. The final blow came when Rogers cut off Nassau's supply lines, making it impossible for remaining pirates to obtain food, water, and ship repairs. One by one, the holdout captains were forced to choose between surrender and abandoning their base. By 1720, Nassau had returned to colonial control, but the pirate republic had demonstrated something remarkable: that criminals could create a functioning society based on democratic principles and mutual cooperation. The lessons learned in Nassau would influence revolutionary movements for decades to come. As we leave this extraordinary experiment in criminal democracy, imagine yourself watching the last pirate ships sail away from Nassau Harbor, carrying with them not just treasure and weapons, but the memory of a place where outcasts had briefly created their own world. But now, we turn to perhaps the most challenging aspect of pirate life, the constant presence of disease and death. The Caribbean of the early 18th century was a paradise that could kill you in a dozen different ways. While Hollywood shows pirates facing death only in dramatic sword fights, the reality was that disease was by far the greatest threat to any crew sailing these crystal blue waters. Yellow fever, malaria, dysentery, scurvy, and typhus turned every pirate voyage into a race against biological catastrophe. A crew of 150 men might lose 30 to disease before seeing their first enemy ship. Understanding how pirates dealt with this constant medical crisis reveals another side of their ingenuity and adaptation. Captain Bartholomew Roberts kept detailed logs of crew health that read like medical case studies. His records show that during one 6-month cruise, his crew battled 3 separate outbreaks of fever, lost 2 men to infected wounds, and suffered through a dysentery epidemic that left half the crew too weak to work the rigging. The pirate response to disease was remarkably sophisticated for its time. They developed quarantine procedures that modern epidemiologists would recognize, isolation protocols for treating different types of illness, and prevention strategies that often surpassed those used by naval vessels and merchant ships. Pirates understood that overcrowding bred disease, so they modified their ships to provide better ventilation and more space per crew member. While naval vessels crammed men into every available space, pirate ships often sailed with crews smaller than their vessels could technically accommodate, trading potential manpower for reduced disease transmission. They also developed early forms of what we would recognize as triage medicine. Pirates couldn't afford to have their best fighters and sailors weakened by caring for crew members who were unlikely to recover, so they created systems for prioritizing medical care based on likelihood of survival and value to ship operations. Perhaps no disease better illustrates pirate medical innovation than scurvy, the vitamin C deficiency that killed more sailors than all battles combined. While naval physicians were still debating theories about bad air and corrupted humors, pirates had developed practical solutions through trial and error. Captain Howell Davis kept what he called his health log, a detailed record of which foods prevented his crew from developing the bleeding gums, loose teeth, and festering wounds that marked scurvy's progression. His observations, predating official naval recognition by decades, identified citrus fruits, sauerkraut, and fresh vegetables as essential for crew health. Pirates established what amounted to floating farms, carrying soil and seeds to grow fresh sprouts during long voyages. They also developed preservation techniques for anti-scurvy foods, creating concentrated lime juice mixtures that could be stored for months without losing their effectiveness. The economic incentive for preventing scurvy was enormous. A crew weakened by disease couldn't fight effectively, work the rigging, or handle the complex maneuvers that pirate tactics required. Pirates who solved the scurvy problem gained a massive advantage over their competitors, both criminal and legitimate. Blackbeard's crew was famous throughout the Caribbean for their robust health, which contemporary accounts attributed to their captain's insistence on fresh food and green medicine. Blackbeard's ship carried a garden of potted herbs and vegetables, tended by crew members who had been recruited specifically for their knowledge of nutrition and plant medicine. This practical approach to scurvy prevention created an underground network of medical knowledge that spread throughout the pirate community. Successful remedies were shared between crews, creating an informal system of medical education that often surpassed what was available in European universities. When bubonic plague outbreaks swept through Caribbean ports in the 1710s and 1720s, pirates found themselves uniquely positioned to understand and combat epidemic disease. Their experience with ship-based quarantine and their informal networks allowed them to respond more effectively than colonial governments. Captain Charles Vane's encounter with plague-stricken Port Royal in 1718 demonstrates sophisticated understanding of disease transmission that wouldn't look out of place in a modern public health textbook. Rather than avoiding the port entirely, Vane established a quarantine anchorage several miles offshore where his crew could monitor the situation while maintaining the ability to retreat if necessary. Vane's protocols required any crew member who had been ashore to spend 5 days in isolation before rejoining the main crew. During this period, they were housed in a separate section of the ship with their own water supply and eating utensils. Anyone showing symptoms of illness was immediately moved to a floating hospital ship that Vane maintained specifically for this purpose. Pirates developed early warning systems for disease outbreaks that relied on their intelligence networks in ports throughout the Caribbean. Tavern keepers, merchants, and dock workers who provided information about ship movements also reported on health conditions, allowing pirate crews to avoid ports where epidemic disease was present. The pirate response to plague also reveals their understanding of what we would recognize as social determinants of health. They observed that disease spread faster in overcrowded, poorly ventilated areas with inadequate sanitation, exactly the conditions found aboard most ships of the era. Pirates modified their vessels to combat these risk factors, creating better ventilation systems, establishing stricter cleanliness protocols, and maintaining lower crew densities. These modifications often made their ships healthier environments than the ports they raided. Pirate medical practice combined folk remedies, military surgery techniques, and innovations born of necessity into a system that was often more effective than conventional 18th-century medicine. Without access to trained physicians, pirates had to become their own doctors, developing skills that would serve them throughout their careers. Every pirate crew included someone designated as the ship's surgeon, though this person might have learned their skills through apprenticeship, military service, or simple experience rather than formal medical training. These surgeons maintained medical chests stocked with instruments and medicines that they had acquired through capture, purchase, or trade. The surgical instruments found aboard Captain Sam Bellamy's ship Wida when it was discovered by underwater archaeologists include bone saws, bullet extractors, and surgical needles of remarkably high quality. These weren't crude, improvised tools, but sophisticated medical instruments that indicated serious commitment to crew healthcare. Pirates pioneered field surgery techniques that wouldn't be adopted by military medicine for decades. They developed rapid amputation procedures for treating infected wounds, understanding that speed was essential when antibiotics weren't available. Their success rates for these procedures were often higher than those achieved in European hospitals. Pain management was another area of pirate medical innovation. Without access to opium or other conventional painkillers, pirates experimented with Caribbean plants and developed alcohol-based anesthetics that could make surgery bearable. Some crews maintained detailed knowledge of local medicinal plants, creating pharmacies that rivaled anything available in colonial cities. The psychological aspects of pirate medicine were equally sophisticated. Pirates understood that maintaining crew morale required demonstrating that injured crew members would be cared for, so they developed rituals around medical treatment that reinforced crew solidarity and mutual support. Perhaps most remarkably, pirates developed early forms of what we would recognize as rehabilitation medicine. A crew member who lost a leg in battle might be retrained as a navigator or quartermaster, allowing them to remain valuable contributors to the crew rather than being abandoned at the next port. The pirate approach to medical care reveals another way these communities challenged the social norms of their era. While conventional society often viewed disability as divine punishment or personal failure, pirates saw it as an occupational hazard that required practical solutions. Captain Israel Hands, who served as Blackbeard's lieutenant despite losing the use of one leg, exemplified this pragmatic approach to disability. Rather than retiring from active piracy, Hands adapted his role to focus on ship navigation and tactical planning, areas where his experience was more valuable than physical mobility. As our journey through the authentic world of piracy draws to a close, imagine yourself standing on the deck of a pirate ship as dawn breaks over the Caribbean. Around you, crew members are beginning their daily routines, checking rigging, preparing weapons, tending to the sick and wounded. This isn't the romanticized world of Hollywood pirates, but something far more complex and human. These were people who faced impossible choices and found ingenious solutions, who created communities based on mutual support in the face of constant danger, who challenged every social convention of their era while developing innovations that were centuries ahead of their time. The golden age of piracy lasted barely 3 decades, but in that brief period, these maritime rebels demonstrated that outcasts could create their own societies, that democracy could function even among criminals, and that human ingenuity could find solutions to problems that defeated conventional wisdom. Let these stories of innovation, courage, and survival carry you into peaceful sleep, knowing that even in the darkest periods of history, human creativity and cooperation found ways to flourish. The real pirates were neither the villains nor the heroes of popular imagination, but something more interesting. They were people, much like ourselves, facing extraordinary circumstances with remarkable resilience and intelligence. Sleep well, and may your dreams be filled with the sound of wind in the rigging and the endless possibilities of the open sea. And so we reach the end of our journey into the real world of pirates, a world far removed from the swashbuckling adventures of Hollywood, but infinitely more fascinating in its complexity and humanity. We've sailed alongside the engineers who transformed captured ships into instruments of maritime warfare, learning how necessity bred innovations that were decades ahead of their time. We've discovered the remarkable women who not only survived in this male-dominated world, but excelled as leaders, fighters, and pioneers of gender equality. We've explored the rise and fall of pirate kingdoms, where criminals created functioning democracies based on principles that wouldn't be recognized by legitimate governments for centuries. And we've witnessed how these communities faced their greatest enemy, not naval forces or rival pirates, but the invisible threat of disease that could destroy a crew faster than any battle. The real pirates weren't the cartoon villains or romantic heroes of popular culture, but something more complex and human. Innovators, survivors, and rebels who created their own societies when the existing world offered them no place. Their legacy lives on not in buried treasure or dramatic battles, but in the ideas they pioneered. Democratic governance, gender equality, technological innovation, and the belief that people could create better societies if they were willing to challenge convention and work together. As you drift off to sleep, carry with you these stories of human ingenuity and resilience. In your dreams, may you sail the Caribbean with the wind at your back, surrounded by a crew bound together by mutual respect and shared purpose, exploring a world where the only limits are those imposed by imagination and courage. Sweet dreams, and may morning find you refreshed and inspired by these tales of the real pirates who once ruled the seas.